Sam Gibson is the technical expert for Goodnature, and he is here beside me right now. G'day, Sam.
Kia ora, Nick. Kia ora, Kato. Kia ora, Derek. Good to see you on the chat.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. You're the first person that's had the courage to do a webinar from outside in your garden, and occasionally when we're doing some tests, you can hear the native birds. What do you have around you mainly? What are you getting up in Gisborne that we perhaps should know about?
Well, yeah, I'm in my beautiful backyard. We're really lucky here in Gisborne, especially during level 4. There's some really beautiful bush blocks, and being out there with my boy, harvesting a few mushrooms and hakeke and kahikatea fruit, and it's an amazing time of year to be in the bush. The tui and the kiriru are going crazy up here, as I'm sure they are for many of you around the country.
You've got a 1-year-old son. Congratulations. So what's your expectation of, looking ahead in the future? What are you expecting for him as far as predator-free work goes?
Oh, gee. That's a big question. So I don't know if all of my expectations will occur in his lifetime, but hopefully in his kid's lifetime, or maybe generations after that. But I'd love to see Aotearoa being a predator-free island nation. I'd love to see a point where we have birds in such abundance that they're deafening in the dawn chorus again, and hopefully we could even get back to a point someday, I'm not talking about right now, but someday where we can have a sustainable harvest of our traditional species as well, because they are incredible birds, and it would just be great to be in a point where we have such abundance that we have that level of surplus. Yeah.
Hey, before we go into your presentation, I just thought, can you just give us a really quick rundown of what finds you at this point of your life now? So where have you come from to be here working for Goodnature?
So I started off as that kid at school as a 12-year-old, where the classroom wasn't necessarily the best classroom for me. And I was really fortunate that my principal and my parents and some of our other people surrounding us had the foresight to send me into the bush. So as a 12-year-old, I was that kid up in Te Urewera, tagging along at the feet of some of New Zealand's leaders in trapping, like Darren Peters and Lindsay Wilson and Dan Bajan, etc. And so I was that kid sitting there in the hut listening to all those conversations. I was that kid loading up with traps and sending off into the bush to set. And so I was present in the transition from fen traps to Doc 200s, and then worked my way through high school, did a little bit of contracting and that sort of thing. Worked in Te Urewera as a ranger, as a trapper, worked in Ruhine as a track cutter, which gave me appreciation for that kind of work. Got shipped down to Fiordland for a few years, where I was doing traps and some of that what many term is unworkable terrain, but it's definitely workable. Been there, done that. And playing with a lot of those birds, takahe and bats and kiwi and whio and all those things that we love to protect. And then from there, I really got introduced into the Goodnature technology, ran a scientific trial down there for Doc, and saw the potential for rat control and saw the potential for stoat control, and that really got me interested. Ended up moving to the North Island and a little while later pursued a role with Goodnature, which is what I'm doing now. We found it was, at that time it was where we're really starting to get momentum behind this predator-free movement, and we're seeing people coming into trapping that didn't have 10 years experience, didn't have 20 years experience, weren't the old guys from the Wildlife Service. We're seeing people coming into trapping that had very little experience in the bush, people starting the journey from many different places. And Goodnature to me made me excited because the technology is so accessible. You don't have to be an expert to set them.
Fantastic.
Takes a couple of days a year, where traditional technology, it's just a bit more. Got me excited about Goodnature, and for whatever reason, they got me on board.
Well, I'm glad they did, and gives us a chance to use your experience and present to the webinar today. So the title you've given us is Tailor Your Trap Network, Project Design and Layout. Let's all sit back with a coffee and hear what you have to present to us. So go for it, Sam.
Right. Well, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of those people that have spent there on the hill to bring us the knowledge that we now have. We're in a really good space as far as trapping in New Zealand goes. So I thank those guys that have been out there doing trapping for a long time. And secondly, I'd like to I'm just aware that I'm following on after Cam Speedy's presentation in the series. So if you haven't checked it out, go and check it out on YouTube. Cam talks a bit about the mentality we should have as trappers, and some of those key points are around taking the time at those trap sites, taking that extra to be, so that you're not thinking about it when you're fall out from the hill. And if things aren't going to plan, so experimentation is key. So if you are interested in that side of thing, go and check out Cam's presentation, and I'm going to do mine on Goodnature technology and about designing projects. So Goodnature started as a conservation company. We're just a bunch of guys and girls that want to see our wildlife flourish again in New Zealand. And from there, we've grown into a massive international company looking after the world's conservation projects, but also backyard house users, urban trappers, and also some industrial settings as well. What I'd like to talk about today is the difference between control and eradication. I'd like to talk through a couple of different methodologies around Stoat networks and why we use them, and a couple of different ways to approach rat networks as well. And then I was hoping to be able to open it up into questions, Goodnature questions, conservation questions, trapping questions in general. So, Stoat control. This here is what a typical Stoat control network looks like in New Zealand. The formula we use for Stoat control is 1 A24 trap per 9 hectares, and this is based on the methodology we've developed through Fen traps, Doc 200s, and now the A24 is taking it to that next level. And when we're looking at it, this is large landscape scale trapping projects. The real key to it is finding the best way of working the country. So when I'm designing a project, I look at the ridges, the rivers, the spurs, any existing dock tracks, forestry tracks, anything I can use to my advantage to work that landscape. And the interesting thing is that stoats do the same. We know that stoats travel linear landscape features. And so by putting your traps on these ridges, rivers, and spurs, you're increasing the likelihood that a stoat's going to run into your trap and have a terminal interaction. These lines typically are between 800 meters and 1500 meters apart on those ridges and spurs, depending on your geology. And we have traps either 100 meters or 200 meters along these lines. And the way you make that decision is based around whether you're getting you do 100 or 200 meters, depending on what you need to get your one trap every 9 hectare density. The next thing I think about is looking after our people. So human can do between 60 and 80 stoat traps in a day. And I like to break up my loops into 60 to 80 trap loops. And that means leaving camp from one place and returning to either the same camp or another camp. And so you can see on this picture here, the two blue huts there were pre-existing huts that we knew we could work out of. So designed a bunch of loops around there and coming back to that same hut. But we also figured out that there's a lot of land in between, so we had to design and strategically, which is what those red dots are there. So it's easy for anyone to draw lines on the map and put huts in places. So when I'm designing these kinds of networks, I'll design it on a computer, and I know what it's like to track cut and work country that someone's designed on a computer. So the first thing I do after I've done that design is ring up a local hunter and be like, take a look at this. What places can I go and what places can't I go? And they'll tell me, no, can't go there. Bluff system there. Better to take important these project designs before you go and lay out the gear too. An example of where this style of Stoat network has worked really well is on the Hefe track. The Hefe track is where they've translocated takahe to their second known wild population, which is incredible. It's outside of the Murchison Mountains. Historically, we've only had them in the Murchison Mountains. And they're breeding and they're getting chicks away, which is a testament to the A24's killing power for stoats, but also a testament to this style of network. Right. Counter to that is a different approach to stoat controlling. This is stoat eradication. And this is landscape dependent in the most part, for the time being anyway. We utilize this form of methodology for islands, peninsulas, or large landscape projects where you can manage the reinvasion from the outside. So that's fence sanctuaries, etc. And we use a much tighter grid network. We use a much tighter density, so one A24 trap per 5 to 6 hectares. And we use a much more intense monitoring network as well. So typically, we use cameras and we use tracking tunnels to monitor stoats. And we'll have tracking tunnels set up across any landscape feature network. But for eradication, you want to have a tight density of tracking tunnels, and often you'll have a tracking tunnel in between each trap site as well as cameras. So an example of where this has worked really well is on Great Island down in Fiordland. And we got a great knockdown in stoats. We knew from our tracking tunnels and our video monitoring that there's still a couple left, and we managed to mop them up. And there was no action there for a period of months. And so that island became functionally eradicated, which is incredible for that ecosystem. However, you know, Fiordland, beach mast, stoats get out of control in those mast years and they swim to islands. So we've still got the trap network in place, and we're still mopping up that reintroduction. However, because of that water boundary, it's functionally eradicated. Right, and so all our stoat control networks, we situate around the species we're trying to protect, the species we're trying to save. We're not just going out there to kill things willy-nilly for the sake of it. And of a methodology that's tailored for a particular species is stoat control for Whio. We know that a single line up a river can protect the Whio population incredibly well. And some people like to put a line up either side, but a single line will do it. And we have traps spaced at 100 meters apart up these rivers. And with most other stoat control networks, we do a 4-monthly service rotation on lures. And this is based around the automatic lure pump that's constantly pushing out fresh stoat lure. And the reason we do that is because the spectrum of species that we're protecting are susceptible to stoat predation all the time. But the Whio is really unique in the way that they are sensitive to stoat predation for 2 periods of the year. And one's during nesting, when they've got nests, the nest and the chicks can be predated upon, as well as those mothers, and during molting. And so what we do is we only have to do two lure changes in the year. We make sure they got fresh lure before nesting in August and fresh lure before molting in March. And this type of thinking can be extrapolated extrapolate it out to any species, as long as you know the species well enough and when they're most sensitive. A really awesome example of this methodology is in the Kaimanawa, where the Sika Foundation have done some incredible work on the kaipo and oamaru. In just 1 year, they've upped the whio numbers from 4 individuals to 11 individuals in just one breeding season. Whio, for that reason, are just incredible. They're so satisfying to work with. You put a little bit of stoat control around them, and they just pump out the chicks. They're one of my favorite birds to work with. Yeah, okay. Rat control, and this is where I personally believe that New Zealand can do a little bit of thinking. I want to talk just about rat control networks and what control looks like. We typically use a 100 by 50 meter grid on flat country, lines 100 meters apart, traps 50 meters along those lines. On hillsides, you're using an A line on that ridge system, you're using a B sidle line, which is 100 meters down in that elevation, that goes around the ridge line, and your C line following on from that. You're looking at a 4 monthly service based on that automatic lure pump as well. So we've got a stoat automatic lure pump, and we've got a rat automatic lure pump, and they're specific. The stoat lure will kill rats also, and the rat lure will kill stoats also, but they're kind of tailored. I think I'm digressing a little bit there. But the key to rat control, I believe, is that you can experience some peaks and troughs, and that's okay. Rat control is just like farming. What we're doing is we're growing species over time. Those good years that we are going to have just need to balance out the bad years. So if we get a blip of, say, 14% in a bad year, in a control area where we're trapping, they not get the same recruitment of juveniles into your year. 2 years or 3 years prior to that, where you've kept your rats under control, you're going to have had great recruitment. So over time, you're going to get great growth for the whole ecosystem. And also to bear in mind around this is one important thing is we often look at our threats and we go, oh no, my rat's got up to 15%, 20%, that's terrible. But we also often forget to look outside of our trap network and go, oh, outside of our trap network, the rats were at 80%, they're at 90%, they're at saturation. And we know that that juvenile birds and nests don't make it through those kind of events. So you keeping a lid on your rats at 15, 20%, it's not the end of the world. Next season, you're going to keep them down below 5% and you're going to get incredible productivity. But that's control. Oftentimes we don't realize how well we're actually doing. Examples of this type of methodology being used is Rotorua canopy tours. They get blips all the time. But the bird life in that block there is testament to the overall great job that they're doing. Pure salt down in Fiordland, exactly the same thing. Where we have species that are incredibly sensitive to rats, there's another approach that I like to use. That approach is a suppression network. It's typically where you have species such as kōkako, tieke, orange-fronted parakeets, mohua, and some of our frog species, that if you don't keep your rats low, you just don't get that same recruitment into the adult breeding population. And this is usually coupled with a high food availability forest. So you can get rat suppression with a 100 by 50 meter grid in lots of cases. Wharearino are testament to that. They're protecting Archies and Hochstetter's frogs. And they got a 2 per hectare 100 by 50 meter grid. They've had rats below 5% consistently since they started, which is incredible. So they operating a suppression network on that 100 by 50. However, in some of our kōkako blocks, we were getting blips up to 20% in a 150 meter grid. And that's not great for kōkako. So what we decided to do was put in a 100 by 25 meter grid, just double that density. And we kept rats down below 0%, which is exactly where we want them for kōkako. So if you've got the resource and you've got a really sensitive species, you may want to look at a suppression network. But for most rat control projects across the country, a control network's absolutely fine for growing ecosystems and growing general forest forage. Right. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about the technology that allows us to utilize this methodology. The A24 is an incredibly effective stoat trap. The reason it's really effective is when we started off with Doc 200s, we soon went to double set Doc 200s for the fact that we know mothers teach their juveniles how to hunt, and we catch multiple animals in one trap in one sitting. So it's not uncommon for us to catch a mother and all her juveniles under an A24 due to its self-resetting nature. So it's really unlocked that part of the stoat's behaviour, which to our benefit, which is great. And it also kills rats. So with the Doc 200, we traditionally have to get around our network enough times to make sure that it's not clogged up with rats, because we know there's way more rats in any area than there are stoats. So it's really just about clearing traps. With the A24, you're killing all the rats and it's still available for stoats. So it's an incredibly effective stoat trap. As well, it's humane, so you're not getting any educated animals. Every interaction's a terminal interaction. There's no yearly maintenance. So historically, with single action traps like our lovely fen trap or our Doc 200, we're looking at with our fen trap, we've got to bead blast them and wax them and all of that sort of thing once every couple of years. And it takes a high amount of trapper expertise to fine set a fen trap. With our Doc 200, we're having to make sure that we yearly, we weight test our traps yearly. We weight test them when they come out of the factory. We need to replace rusty parts, and we need to replace elements of the boxes. With the A24, when you're putting it out there, you're putting it out there for the lifespan of the trap. There's very little maintenance you need to do, and it takes no expertise to set this trap. I've got kindergarten groups in Fiordland, kindergarten groups in the North Island here. I've got a 93-year-old managing an A24 network up here in Gibson. So it's accessible to everyone. It just makes trapping easy. And we're down to 3 checks a year, which is, a 4-monthly cycle is pretty incredible. When you think about your rat networks, you want to be every 2 weeks. So that's 24 checks a year. With your stoat networks, with a single action trap, every month, which is 12 checks a year. So to bring that down to 3 checks a year means that me as a trapper, I can service a much greater area, get more conservation work done, and it just becomes a whole lot more efficient. The trap kills 24 predators before you have to change a gas canister. That's winning, and it's lightweight. So when I grew up in Te Urewera trapping, we were flying in feds loads of Doc 200s, sling loaded under helicopter, and we'd do that for a couple of days. And that's a lot of helicopter time. It's hugely expensive. And then we'd have to go out on the hill. And with our new health and safety regulations that didn't exist back then, and my knees and hips are probably testament to that, we now can only carry 2 double set Doc 200s. I can carry 25 A24s really comfortably. So you're getting a lot more efficiency out of your manpower, and you're also reducing that helicopter cost time, which reduces your setup cost quite significantly. But yeah, that's pretty much project design. Goodnature decided early on that when this predator-free movement kicked off, we wouldn't just be a trap supply company. We realized that people were coming up at this trapping gig from different places and different levels of knowledge. So we thought we'd provide a project design service for free. If the project was large enough, we'd send someone along to help set it up to best practice, and we'd always be available for that ongoing partial care, that ongoing problem solving. So that's kind of what I do. That's my job. But yeah, if anyone wants to know more about that, feel free to get in touch. I I'd just like to finish off by thanking all our trappers in New Zealand. We're well on the way to achieving a world first. There's no other large island nation that I'm aware of that is getting rid of such a spectrum of invasive species and causing their birds to flourish. That's where I'd love to be. So thank you all for the bits you're doing, biting off the piece of the jigsaw puzzle and getting the work done. So thank you very much.
Great job, Sam. Yeah, that was great. That's fantastic. You did really well. How do you keep so positive and motivated? Because you are a positive chap. But what would you say to other team leaders who are, looking after bunches of volunteers? What's your strategy to keep them motivated?
To keep them motivated? Oh, there's nothing like a warm hut and dry trappers to keep people motivated. But other than that, I reckon as well, it's just positivity begets positivity. I found early on when I was managing teams in the bush that no matter how cold and hungry and tired I was, if I could just find the little bit of spark, little bit of bubble to bring up the energy and crack a little bit of joke, and I may not be feeling that way inside, but if I could find that little bit of positivity, hey, people feed off that, hey. And that's what I try and do in my day-to-day. A lot of folk are like, oh, that country's not workable, that looks really hard. I kind of meet it with, let's get up there. Let's get it done. And you get people on the hill and they end up trapping country that they didn't think was achievable and getting great results.
Fantastic. All right, let's get into some questions. I've got some over here, and I thought we'd hit you with the obvious .200, the A24 users, and we'll hit you with a few of these. So one person was mentioning they get spider webs within a couple of weeks and have to clean them out. What's your thoughts on that?
For sure, that can be a case. It happens with all different whatever you put out there in the bush. Usually, it's got a cavity, whether it's a tunnel or a possum trap or an A24. You're gonna get cool little creatures trying to live in these great little habitats that you've provided for them. It's just part of the game. We just got to keep cleaning them out. Overall, it's about having, in a network, it's about having enough traps effective so that you can get the job done. We know that one or two is going to get filled up with spider webs or something's going to go wrong, but it's about having enough in your network to get the job done.
Catherine's just asked, how do you recommend cleaning the A24s? So what's any golden, really good tips for cleaning?
Cleaning them. Firstly, I like in the bush, I like to use a little bit of moss in the top. So with I'm not sure if you can see me, in the top here of your A24, you can get some mold. So I just like to give that either clean with my finger or a little bit of moss. That's how I like to clean them up. That's my worry area. And then I can also get down inside there with a stick, etc. Not my fingers, with a stick or a nice little cloth, and tidy up the inside of there. That's usually where you get most of the damage. If I'm going to be coming at the trap from this angle, I'm not doing it with my hands until that's gassed out. So you have to unscrew the gas. Trust me, it's not good if you put your fingers up inside there. So unscrew the gas, and then you can give it a clean out with a nice little cloth if you want to. But I find generally rats and stoats aren't too concerned with the cleanliness of a trap. I've caught rats and stoats in some pretty manky traps historically, but if you can clean them, by all means. And I think mostly us as trappers, when you walk away from a trap proud of your trap sets, you're going to sleep way better at night. So whatever makes you comfortable about your trap set and the condition of your trap, that's what you need to do.
I've got another one for you. Do the seals need replacing after a few years? That's a fairly technical question.
Do the seals need replacing after a few years? Not really. There's some situations where if these things get, like I know in Fiordland where we get a huge amount of flooding, you can get siltation and things like that. In that case, you might want to chuck a couple of fires through it. If it's not functioning that well, you might want to get it back to us and we can figure something out. But seals in general, we've done a whole lot of work on seals and that over time. And the ones we got now, they're good. They should be lasting the lifespan of the trap.
Cam's actually said, spring the trap after taking out the gas as it has one more shot. Is that right?
Yeah, great point, Cam. So I'll show you that if you like.
Yeah, do demonstrate, because that could be a trick for young players.
It's a good party trick, that's for sure. It's sorry, I got a gas canister behind the laptop here. So yeah, health and safety. This is a good thing to know. So you'll hear we know it's tight enough when the gas stops hissing. I am always instructed not to set it off with my fingers in front of people because it gives a bad example. So note, Goodnature people, I'm not doing that. Thank you. Got a handy little rat here, little pirate rat. These come with all the traps. They're kind of cool. So he gets inside the trap and goes. So a big whack, eh? However, when we degas the trap, that's really cold, so don't let that stick to your fingers. However, there's still a charge in the chamber here, so just be aware of that. It's like a gun. When I come up to a trap, I just treat it like a gun. I want to check that it's empty before I start playing with it. So even when there's no gas canister on there, there's still a charge, and there can always be two as well. So note, there's not two in this one. So you just want to make sure that your trap's gassed out before you start playing with it. There can be one in the chamber.
That's good. That was a good, helpful hint from one of our observers. Very good. Nice job. Do you use trail cameras to observe trap interaction? And if so, what have you learned? I'm sure you have used the cameras, definitely.
Yeah, we do lots, and we do a lot of trial work. We've got a couple of people within the company that do camera trials for us, and we also do camera trials with educational institutes like Hollyford as well. So we've learned heaps around animal behaviour, how they interact with traps. We've also, the biggest thing that we find though is when people do camera work in their backyards, they see rats climbing over traps, whether it's a Doc 200, whether it's an A24, whether it's anything, you know. Same with possums. And what we know is that animals like to investigate things. It's not a sign that your trap's not working. It's just that animal's investigating these things, and it's about interactions to kill ratio. And so you're going to get a whole lot of non-lethal interactions where the animal's climbing all over the outside of the trap and figuring it out because they're really curious. They're beautiful animals. They're amazing animals. And so they check out the trap and they figure it out and see this new thing in their territory. And then after time, you're going to kill them inside the trap as well. So don't be put off if you're doing camera work and you see animals climbing all over the trap. It doesn't mean your trap's not being effective. It just means that that animal is sussing it out.
Exactly. Hey, having a couple of people saying they can't see the two of us, that will probably be that you're either on an iPad or maybe an iPhone, and you have to go down the bottom and choose the menu of whether you're watching the presentation or whether you're watching the chat, or I think that might help. So let's have another look.
YouTube, you can see us as well if you'd like to.
I'll say that again for me, can you?
And you can get to the YouTube recording afterwards and see the recording if you'd like to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on a couple of these things, like you mentioned with the health and safety and operating traps, just for those users that may be still getting to terms with their traps, they can go onto your website, of course, and there's all kinds of information there that'll help them out, won't there?
Absolutely. Jump on our website. There's some great videos. There's some really informative information there. But also, if there's any questions, just get on the blog, give us a call. We've got some great people, Ange and Tom, and they'll help you out with any of your questions as well.
Right. Sue Boyd, sorry, I don't think I can help you if it isn't laptop. I'm not sure what's happening there. I'm just following up on your reply about your PC. What months of the year do you typically check traps? That's from Nathan. Is there sort of a pattern you use?
It depends where I am. So if I'm trapping down in Whio, then I really try and avoid winter. I'm just sick of, I spent too many years digging out traps from snowdrifts on the top. Not Whio, then I try and avoid the snow months. But up here, it's really around your species, hey? So I like to provide fresh lure when my species are most susceptible. And so usually that'll be spring, it'll be autumn. And I try and time my 4-monthly cycle to correspond with either the fruiting, and each environment is different. You guys know your environments, eh? You know what's fruiting in your environments. You know when things are going to jump. You know when they're going to climb. So I'll be tailoring my services to coincide with those environmental conditions. And it's going to be, I can't give you like a set like, oh, this month, because it's going to be different to each of your blocks. But that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. That's when I'm tailoring my lure changes, if that makes sense.
Paul asks, any design improvements in the pipeline, Sam?
Paul, if you come down to Goodnature HQ and you go into our storage room, there are boxes of ideas, and there's boxes of prototypes, and there's boxes of concepts. And then if you go into our lab, you'll see on the walls there's lures for Africa, there's traps for Africa, there's option 1, option 2, option 3, option There's things being heat tested, there's been things being pressure tested, there's things being lathed. There's a lot of things in the pipeline, Paul, and you never know what Goodnature's gonna pop out around the corner. We're quite good at popping out some groundbreaking things without really letting the public know beforehand. There's a lot of things that I don't know that's been worked on, so kind of not at liberty to discuss those things, but definitely keep your ear to the ground, Paul. If you come pay us a visit, you'd be surprised the things that have been worked on by our design team.
Now, when we started, you said you were going to give us a demo, which I think would be really helpful, of a DOC 200 weight setting, and we could do that now, just while I've got you on the bigger screen in the middle. Okay,
so this is one thing that I think's really trappers in New Zealand. There's still a lot of DOC 200s out there on the ground, which is great. They're a great trap. But oftentimes our DOC 200s come out of the factory and they aren't adequately weight tested. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way. I just am saying that so that if we do weight test them when we get a hold of them, it just means that we can make sure that they're going off at a weight that that is adequate for juvenile stoats, and increases our trapping effectiveness. So to weight test a DOC 200, we really want to be it to be going off between 50 and 100 grams. And so to do that, I use washers. Right. So if I set my DOC 200, and I recommend doing this in the box, it's a little bit difficult, just freehand like this. But if you set your DOC 200 and you set it off with a 50-gram washer, it's too light. If you set it off with a 100-gram washer, that's good. But if you can't set it off with your 100-gram washer, it's too heavy. And so what we can do, so use different weights for that. And if it's going off, good one. If it's going off too heavy, one little thing that we can do is we can get our claw hammer and we can reduce the length of the trigger arm. So we can get our claw hammer like this, and we can bend the trigger arm. And that little trigger arm sits on the set. So you can bend the trigger arm just a little bit. I mean just a little bit. You see, like that. And that there's reducing the length of the trigger arm. And that can make your trap spring off lighter, which is exciting. If it's going off, too light, you actually have to remove the trap from the box, just with the 2 little screws. And what you are looking for is everyone knows the sear on a Dock 200. And this sear here, if you punch that out with a screwdriver and your hammer from the other direction, from upside down, it's going to pop up and it's going to put more pressure on your trigger arm and make your trap heavier set. So you can bring it from under 50 grams up to over 50 grams. So how we do that? So we get a nice little screwdriver and we put that on the sear, and the sear's got a little bit of movement in it. And we get our nice little claw hammer and just give it a little tap like that, and that's going to pop up. That's how we make it a little bit heavier. And we had to do that. You should do that every year, because you want your traps to be going off. You don't want them to be ineffective. And one check a year, I always make sure, and always have made sure, that I weight test my Dock 200s. So hopefully that's helpful to someone.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, there's a slight lag coming out of Gibson. I don't know. I mean, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but a slight lag. So there was a little jerky, but I think we got the message. And you know, it's they can always contact you if they need to find out more about that. Hey, here's one here. Can you address the concerns around kiwi and the height of the trap needs to be mounted to keep it safe? ? Does putting them higher on the tree reduce effectiveness? There's a bit in there. You can answer that?
I can unpack that for sure. So we've been doing a bunch of work with the Kiwi Recovery Group, and it's really clear that that some species of kiwi we want to be using race sets, and some species of kiwi it's okay. You can use a standard 12 centimeter set, vertical 12 centimeter set. Off the top of my head, I think it's Haas, Torqueweka, Rowi, and little spots that you want to be using race sets for. And that's great. Race sets, as far as effectiveness goes, we've used race sets right across the country, whether we're talking about Weka, whether we're talking about other non-targets that we're trying to eliminate. Not eliminate as in like get rid of, eliminate as in like not interact with the trap. And so race sets, they're still really effective, both for stoats and rats. It can reduce the time with Norways as opposed to shippies. Shippies are fine. I've used race sets for shippies and they're all good, just as effective. But for Norways, it can reduce your knockdown time. So instead of being a couple of months, you might just get a longer knockdown time. But yeah, race sets, they're real effective for stoats. They're real effective for shippies. You guys know that these animals climb. It's not an issue. Yeah.
So you mentioned there, somebody asked, what is a raised set?
What is a raised set? Right. Raised set is, you know how I'd have my trap set 12 centimeters of vertical surface of a tree? Raised set means that you're bringing it up to a meter or 1.2, depending on where you are and what your protocols are in your region. But 1.2, you're safe as houses. We know Weka can jump to a meter. That's why we don't use ramps. That's why we use vertical surfaces of trees and put it at a meter. That's the real deal.
It's got a technical person called John Parker has come and said earlier advice readjusting weight and release. Oh, I saw that. It's disappeared again. Where is it? John Parker. Early advice adjusting the weight of the Dock 200 involved bending the top yoke, not bending the trigger arm or punching out the seat. Comment, please.
Yeah, so there's many ways of doing it, and this is the great thing about trapping. We've all got our methods, and we've all got our ways of doing things. And Dan, I think it's Dan. Thanks for your comment. That's awesome. And mate, like you've got a way of doing things the way you want to do them, and they get the results. And I got a way of doing things that gets me the results. And neither of them are wrong. They're both right. And if you're getting the results with it, by all means, get into it. Yeah, I'm sure Dan's someone that people can contact as well. I'm just trying to share the tips that I know, and there's many others that have great tips out there also.
That's right, and it's good that people do share, and that's what we all ask for. There's no right way to do everything. It's just everybody likes to share. Just on that, somebody's asked, you're suggesting a 4-month service interval, and Goodnature often suggests 6 months.
Right.
Bit of a change.
Yeah, not really. So we say up to 6 months, and in an urban, oftentimes you'll get 6 months out of your lure for sure. Just in situations where, so in your backyard setting in an urban trapping environment, what you're looking at is an environment that's got stable weather gradients, and the outcomes of you pushing your lure out for an extra couple of months aren't that severe. You're going to catch them, and you're going to get them around your they're not going to get into your compost, and that's what you're after. In the bush, however, you've got some pretty unique environments. So obviously a trap in a stable environment in your backyard is really different to the Hollyford Valley or Fiordland, where it's just wet and horrible, and then you've got incredibly hot, and you've got a lot of variability in there. And the outcomes of that is that you're trying to get conservation success. And so for me, we know that lures, whatever lure you put out there, long life or anything else, its effectiveness degrades over time. And so what I find is for me, I'm really comfortable with 4 months in a conservation setting. And others are comfortable with 6 months. For me, I know that the best results I'm going to get is when we've got them on that 4 monthly rotation in most cases. But many people are getting success on 6.
Good answer. Catherine wants to know, do you leave traps unset for a period of time so those rats get comfortable with it before you set it, or is it not worth doing that?
So that's a really great question. Was that Catherine?
Yeah. Good
on you, Catherine. That's a good question. So that's a thing that we used to do for stoats particularly, and possums as well, where we would pre-feed traps and then we'd turn them on and clobber them and get a massive knockdown. Just meant that the animals were getting comfy with them, getting a couple of free feeds first. But we're finding with Goodnature technology, you get an awesome knockdown without that pre-feed with rats. So I don't have an issue with that. I mean, you could do either. But for me, for labour saving, and I know I'm going to get the result, I just do it all at once. Turn them on when I set them. That's what I do, and it gets us the result. But hey, if it makes you feel comfy and you've got the extra time and resource to do it, by all means, go for it.
Just a couple more before we go. I'll be interested in your take on best bait out there. I know the A24 has a bait, the secret recipe, but for dot 200s and other such traps, what's your take on bait usage?
Best lures, again, it's about your environment and what works for you. And I think there's a conversation here between long life lures and short life lures. We've got some really incredible long life lures out there, like our 4 month lure, like our automatic lure pumps, and they're constantly pushing out fresh lure. But if you're looking for the ultimate lure for your backyard, it could be that your particular rats favor something else. It could be that you might want to try peanut butter. It could be you might want to try white chocolate buttons. I've tried figs when I've had persistent rats in my ceiling. I've tried dried figs, and that worked. Expensive, but it worked. And so again, as Cam said, actually, the more different things you try in your area, the better. For me, I'm really happy in a bush sense with our automatic lure pump formulas. But hey, if you think there's something better, there's lots of options out there. Peanut butter is a standard. Sounds like Cam swears by mutton fat. I haven't tried that, but I like a bit of fresh meat in my leg holds from time to time. Possums, a bit of raspberry jam's always good. I try a whole bunch of different things and other methodologies, and have done over the years. But it's about, again, trial and error, finding out what works for you in your situation. And I think we need to work away from people like myself being like, oh, blanket rule, this is the law that's going to work right across the country in every situation. No, it's about you guys finding out what works for you through trial and error. And when you're looking at labour savings, that's when you look at okay, those long life lures, they're the most effective if you're going to be leaving your trap for a long period of time. I'm real happy. I've put my bloody name on those ALP as far as effectiveness in the bush. Yeah.
Shirley Potter says fresh rabbit is catching stoats pretty well if you have a supply, and walnuts great for rats, especially this time of year. Fabulous.
Totally. We were shooting so much venison when I was working down in Fiordland that we were using fresh venison. And like now, at this point in my life, when I get a kid and not hunting as often, that would be sacrilege. But it's whatever you got on hand, eh?
Fantastic. Hey, that's tremendous. Look, thanks so much, Sam, for your expertise. The great thing is down the side of this presentation, and the same comments will go on the recorded version. You can follow people's questions, and some of them being answered and tips being put on it on our chat box, which is just fantastic. I suppose best way to contact you again, can you let us know? Best way to contact you at Goodnature?
At Goodnature, the best way to contact me is either via my email. It's really easy, just sam@goodnature.co.nz, or give me a call as well. My phone's always on, 02 777 50016. If you want to contact me about things that aren't Goodnature related, just get a hold of me on Instagram, Sam the Trap Man. Yeah.
That's great. A nice we note there from Jesse Morgan from PFNZ Trust, who says, thanks, Sam. It was fantastic, which is lovely. Jesse and Rebecca and her team at the Predator-Free New Zealand Trust are working through this and putting on these webinars, which I think are really cool, and having experts like you really does help. Could you just leave us then to finish with just a message of a nice positive message so we can continue doing what we're all doing out there?
I guess I'm just so impressed with how many people, I go into schools now, and I go into schools to have a yarn with some of the kids, and I turn up with the ideas of what I might talk about, and they know all that already. They're asking the really intense, in-depth level questions, and that's changed over the last 5 years. And so I'm really excited. Our generation are growing in knowledge, but those kids coming up underneath us, they're going to be switched on trappers. When I see that, I'm thinking, gee, achieving predator-free New Zealand is totally doable, especially with how enthusiastic these kids are, and especially with how knowledgeable these kids are, and the love they have for our environments, our ecosystem, and the land. It's awesome.
Lovely, lovely words. Thanks so much. Back to Gisborne now, and that what was making the most noise behind you? Was that a chook?
Yeah, my chooks, eh? I've got a little flock of chooks here, which keeps us fed during level 4 lockdown. Between that and the freezer full of venison, we're doing all right. Yeah, thanks for the series, Predator Free. You guys are doing great things. Really appreciate the knowledge that you guys are passing out to the public. It's gold.
Yeah, cool. Thanks everybody for joining us again. We've got another one coming up soon. And remember, if you want to look at some of the ones we've done up till now, there's 3 others, and they might be good viewing with a nice cup of tea while we're still in level 4 lockdown. We'll see you again really soon. See you later. Bye-bye, everybody.
Ka kite.